So there's an idea that I've encountered in industry and at MIT, which is that if we can just get the data good enough and robust enough that the data speaks for itself. And I think the answer that we're going to find is that data never speaks for itself. It requires a person to give it a voice, to explain it, to make it sensible, to provide narrative to it, and to provide also a sense of connection to a person who's done this work. When you sit in a meeting and someone is presenting to you this really detailed analysis, I found myself in meetings where someone is presenting some sort of really detailed analysis. And one of the things you know consciously or subconsciously is that they could be lying. They could have made up the data. They probably haven't. But they could have introduced some kind of error to it. And we know that we can never have as much expertise as the person who's communicating this analysis to us. So one of the things that we do as humans is something called substitution, where we substitute something that's really hard to be able to evaluate, like, is this really detailed analysis correct, with something that's easier to evaluate, like, how credible do I think the speaker is? And we use that for a lot of judgments. And so that's why actually working on the tools for yourself and for your organizations of how people present as credible and how they're able to convey data in a way that feels credible can actually speed up the decision-making process within organizations. Because it's really hard for us to actually know at that deep, deep level, did someone do something right? And it's really hard for us to turn off that really basic human instinct that is deciding, do I believe this person? A struggle that I've often seen companies have is how do you take this really complicated analysis, and especially as people move up through organizations, how do they take their expertise and how do they explain what they're doing to people who are not experts in their subject matter? And so what my work and my teaching focuses on is how do we explain complicated, difficult concepts from experts to non-experts. So if your organization struggles with those kinds of communications, or if you have individuals who are looking to move up to the next level of being able to communicate, that's where I really spend my time, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, is in equipping people with the skills to be able to think about how do we make the complex understandable to other people so that your whole team is making the right decisions. So one of my friends called me up, and she's a hand surgeon at Boston Children's. And she had heard that I work on communication issues. And she was finding that she was spending all of this time trying to talk to patients about surgeries and outcomes, and that it just wasn't going the way that she wanted. And we talked about some real things that are considered, in my field, pretty basic about how do you structure communications. And the biggest thing that we talked about was about putting the impact on the patient up front. And it was really interesting to have that back and forth with her, because one of the things that she came to realize was, oh, I'm an expert in surgery. My job is to figure out what the right procedure for someone is. So it's my inclination to start with, here's what your diagnosis is, here's what the procedure is going to be, here are the risks on the procedure, and maybe at the end of that conversation, I'll mention whether or not you're going to get better, how long it's going to take, and if you'll regain full mobility in your hand. And so one of the things that she tested out as a change on that was starting every conversation with either, you're going to be able to play hockey this season, or I'm sorry, you're going to have to sit this season out. And it was really gratifying for me to hear her say that that simplified her conversation so much and really helped actually focus her patients around the things that they cared about and actually allowed them to pay better attention to her. And that's the really exciting part of data communications, is that the things that really help people, they're not easy, but they're not always complicated. Making complicated things easy to understand takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of thinking to do that. But again, if you're trying to make things not complicated, it's not that complicated a process.